I want to have special medical boards for integrative medicine and homeopathic medicine, and I'm licensed under that Arizona Board of Integrative and Homeopathic Medicine, and that's the license that I have this conversation under, and not my Texas license. I'm trained as an ophthalmologist and did traditional ophthalmology with a focus on cataract surgery for 30 years or so. I had a lot of fun being an ophthalmologist. I was able to do a lot of things that changed the way ophthalmology is practiced. I had a great deal to do with bringing intraocular lenses into this country, or the use of them. When I was trained, we would simply take the lens out of the eye, and people would end up wearing really big, thick glasses. Of course, those allowed you to see, but they were fairly disabling because everything looked 30% too big and 30% too close, and it was hard to walk or drive or whatever. So I was one of the early people to put lenses in eyes after cataract surgery. And then there were some problems with the European lenses that we used in the beginning, so I modified those and got lenses to work better, and then began to teach others how to do that. So that was one of the fun things I did. When I was trained, we kept patients in the hospital for 2 weeks with both eyes blinded, and of course, the elderly tend to become disoriented and even psychotic if you keep them in bed and blind them for a couple of weeks. So I developed a way to make a watertight incision so that they didn't have to stay in bed, and we could actually get them up and walk them immediately from the surgery table, and that changed a lot of things as well. And also we had a problem with people, the elderly, going into the hospitals. You know, elderly people have a tendency to get a particular pattern of living. They eat certain things that agree with them and that keep their digestive and urinary processes working. There are foods that upset them, and so you put them in a hospital and change all of that. They commonly get sick just from being outside their normal environment and often fall and hurt themselves. One of the things we began then to work on was outpatient surgery. So being able to operate on cataract and then have people go immediately home was a great benefit, and we helped, along with my anesthesiologist and internist, develop the techniques for that and taught how to do that. And I guess the next thing I did in ophthalmology that was kind of fun is I did the majority of the research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery. So I did about 90% of that research for the company called WITCHCRAFT. But during that process of doing the laser surgery, we didn't know that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. And so I was using the laser to carve the scar off of the cornea of a fellow from India that had leukemia. And it carved the scar off well enough, but it also released viruses from his cornea. And that went into my nose and into my brain, and I got encephalitis. And so I got to where I could see a patient, know what was wrong with him, but I couldn't remember how to write a prescription. I also developed spastic movements, so I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden I'd do something like that, which doesn't work really well if you're operating inside somebody's eyeball. And I had overwhelming fatigue. And so for all those reasons, I had to quit work at the end of November of 1995. And so I slept 16 hours a day, had 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch, it'd go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. I went to the best doctors I could find in Boston and New York, et cetera, and they all said, well, you have 3 viruses in your brain. We don't know what to do about it. Good luck. So during that 2 or 3 hours a day I could think, I had to figure out how to get myself well. And so I began the journey of trying to figure out how I might do that. And one of the things that resonated with me was that every cell in the body had the same hardware. Even though cells look quite different, just like a laptop looks different than a desktop computer, they still have all the same basic parts. And I thought, well, if I can figure out how to make one cell work, I can make them all work. And so I started down that road, and I bought bunch of cellular biology books, which I hadn't read in 30 years, and began to read through them. And one of the things that resonated with me, it said that cells have to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. Well, I didn't really remember much about pH except it was acid-base balance. But as an eye surgeon, I didn't really need to know much about that for 30 years. And so I began to study pH and discovered that pH is simply the measurement of voltage in a liquid. If you think about a copper wire, you just turn the switch on and the electrons flow, you turn the switch off and they stop. But in a liquid, it can either be an electron donor or an electron stealer. And by convention, if the liquid is an electron stealer, you put a plus sign in front of the voltage. And if it's an electron donor, you put a minus sign in front of the voltage. By convention also, you take the voltage and you convert it to a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14 and call it pH. So plus 400 millivolts of electron stealer is the same as a pH of 0, and minus 400 millivolts of electron donor is the same as a pH of 14. When you read then that cells have to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45, that's a synonym of minus 20 to minus 25 millivolts, give or take a millivolt. So I said, oh, cells have to have voltage to work. That makes sense. And so all of a sudden, this new way of thinking about things was obvious to me. The next issue was, how do you measure it? Well, of course, if you take a standard pH meter, it has a switch on it. You can switch it from pH or millivolts, whichever one you want to have it read out. And you simply stick the probe in a liquid and it'll tell you what the pH is or what the millivolts is and or convert it to the logarithmic scale of pH for you. So I said, well, how do you measure it in the body? And I found that a chap named Nakatani was the first person to use modern electronics to measure acupuncture circuits, and published in 1951. So I got his rather rudimentary equipment, started measuring, and where my brain should be running at minus 25 millivolts, I found it was running between minus 2 to minus 4 millivolts. So then I knew why it didn't work. Didn't have the juice to do it. So the next issue is, well, what am I going to do about it? So I began to do some more reading and found that a Russian chap had figured out the waveform that would more efficiently transfer electrons to cell membranes. I began to try to learn about that and discovered that there was a Russian pediatrician named Zulia Valieva Frost. Zulia Valieva married a chap from London named Frost and had moved to London. And she was in the process of teaching people how to use this Russian device to transfer energy to cells. So I called her and I said, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. And she said, well, as luck would have it, I'm teaching my first seminar in San Francisco in 3 days. I said, sign me up, I'll be there. So I went to that seminar and got the Russian device and began to recharge my cells. And in about 6 weeks or so, things began to get better. The other thing that happened about that time was that I was on an airplane and there was a nurse sitting next to me from this Dallas area. And she began to tell me that she had lymphoma, had this big tumor around her neck and scattered throughout her body, and that she had gone to Mexico, and in a matter of days the tumors were gone, even though MD Anderson had told her to go home and die. So I went down to visit with the docs that helped her to see how in the world they did that, and that was sort of the beginning of my journey along with this other business of the electronics to figure out how to get well. And one of the things they taught me was that essentially all tumors are associated with infection in your teeth, particularly root canal teeth. And so she had gone down and they had pulled her root canal tooth and cleaned up the infection in her mouth, and in a matter of days her tumors were gone. And she sent me not only photographs, but she sent me her medical records from MD Anderson of when she came back, and they proved that her tumors had disappeared. So I had a root canal tooth here in what's called the spleen stomach acupuncture circuit. And so my docs here in Dallas said there's nothing wrong with that tooth. But I'd also developed a bleeding disorder, and so I went back down to Mexico and had the dentist that had operated on this nurse work on me, and when she pulled that tooth, there was so much infection in the bone, it splattered all over her mask. And yet I had no symptoms as far as the tooth was concerned. But 48 hours after she pulled the tooth, my bleeding disorder was cured. And that was rather amazing. And then over the next 6 weeks or so, my brain started to work again. And so that's how I started going down this road of figuring out how the body really works and what the role of voltage is in the body, because it's obviously so different than what I was taught in medical school. One of the things that I was led to try to understand was acupuncture. Actually, that was part of a bigger picture in that I was sitting in my chair at home and I said to myself, well, obviously traditional medicine that I was taught told me go home and die. And so that obviously wasn't working so well. But that sometimes chiropractic works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes acupuncture works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes essential oils work, sometimes they doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these various medical models that sometimes work and sometimes don't. So my thinking was, if I could figure out, there has to be a common denominator that goes through all of these. Otherwise, because, I mean, if things work, it's because it's following some basic laws, some basic rules of how things are supposed to work. If I could figure out what that common denominator was running through all of these different paradigms, then I'd know how to get myself well. And it began to become apparent to me that the voltage piece was the common denominator for all of these things. Now, obviously it becomes very complicated when you start, particularly someone like me who has no background in electronics or even in physics. I had, freshman college physics, and that was my background. The issue is, how do you figure out what the common denominator is? And I began to go down a different road in that I began to understand that there's no such thing as a bunch of little balls of electrons spinning around a charged ball in the center. It's been known for probably 75 years or so that that's really not what an atom is, but that we still teach that. And so I began to read and I fortunately was able to talk to some various people who had gone down that road before me and began to understand more about what an atom is, because if you don't understand what energy is, what an atom is, even how the universe works, you can't understand how a cell works. And so I began to consider that there were alternatives. So one of the things that was a great influence on me was the work of Schauberger, in the Swiss water specialist who had figured out how to make a flying saucer that was fueled by water. And he was captured by Hitler, as you probably know, and made to make us work in that industry for the Germans. He understood very, very well that there are things that spin right and concentrate the energy into a point, which of course we call implosion, and there's something that spins left that starts small and gets bigger and then disappears, we call an explosion, and that those are the two basic kinds of energy. Schauberger's work with water and energy was very influential on my road down trying to figure out how the body works. The other thing that was very powerful was to read the work that muscles are piezoelectric. And so I began to consider, and I was initially wrong. I thought our muscles were wired up the way a 12-volt battery is. You know, you take the cover off of a 12-volt battery, and there are a bunch of 1.5-volt batteries all wired together in there. And I thought that's the way our body was wired up. That our muscles were just one big battery that provided power for the cells to work. But then I began to notice that there were patients that had normal total body voltage as I measured it, but there would be one circuit out or one organ out. And I said, well, then I have to be wrong about how we're wired up. And I began to consider that acupuncture meridians were stacks of muscle batteries wired together into one single column that provided power. And I was talking with one of my colleagues, Dr. Evans, about this, and he said, well, have you read Tom Myers's book, Anatomy Trains. I said, no, I never heard of it. And he said, well, you should read it. So I get Myers's book. And Myers is a massage therapist who had access to cadavers. And he would use blunt dissection and started dissecting the fascia and discovered that it would go all the way from the toe to the head or all the way from your hands to the head and surround muscle batteries stacked one on top of each other, which is exactly what I had come to the conclusion we had to have in the body, but he'd already done the dissection. So I started with Myers's work. Now, unfortunately, he stopped at the neck, and a lot of the stuff I was interested in, like the eye, was obviously above the neck. So, but I started with his work, and I got anatomy apps, which fortunately allowed me to look at if on an acupuncture 2D drawing there's a line that goes from here to here, what muscle goes from here to here? And I could go to the app and figure that out. So what I was able to do was to develop a roadmap, an atlas of the muscle battery packs, and come to the conclusion that acupuncture meridians are simply stacks of muscle batteries surrounded by a common sheath or common stocking of fascia. And the other thing that had been reported is that fascia are simply semiconductors. So, of course, you know better than I, a semiconductor is a collection of molecules that moves electrons at the speed of light, but only in one direction. So that made a lot of sense. So then the fascia that we have surrounding our stacks of muscle batteries is simply the body's wiring system. So now we have a battery system. We have a wiring system. And that helped me begin to understand why things that didn't seem to make sense actually made perfect sense. So for
Hey man, you know I'm really okay. The gun in my hand will tell you the same. But when I'm in my car, don't give me no crap, 'cause the slightest thing and I just might snap it out. When I go driving, I stay in my lane. We're getting cut off, it makes me insane. Open the glove box, reach inside, gonna wreck this fuck. I'm getting deep. You drive on my ass, your foot's on the gas, and your next breath is your last. Guess I got a bad habit. I'm blowing away. Yeah. Got a bad habit. Yeah. And it ain't going away. Drivers are rude, such attitudes. But when I show my peace, complaints see some things odd. Feel like I'm God, you stupid, dumb shit, goddamn motherfucker! I open the glove box, reach inside.
I want to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me. It's a little bit unusual, I think, to have an eye surgeon speaking to physicists. But nevertheless, I'm honored that you would allow me to come and share some thoughts with you about the role of voltage in the body. I always start my lectures by announcing that I'm not speaking with my Texas MD license. The medical board of the state of Texas does not allow its physicians to talk about anything that's not standard of care medicine. And of course, standard of care medicine is pharmaceutical medicine, surgery, and physical therapy. And obviously what I'm talking about today involves other things. So I'm speaking today with my Arizona homeopathic and integrative medicine license. I want to acknowledge certain people that have contributed greatly to much of the information I'm going to share today. This is the Tennant Institute staff, and we have Dr. Marr and Dr. Hyde in the audience with us. If there are those of you who become intrigued by some of the things we're talking about, they'll be happy to help demonstrate to you how all of this works. In addition, I want to acknowledge Eileen McCusick, whom you heard speak this morning, and her major contributions to this area as well. So thank you, Eileen. So what are emotions? Well, people talk about having them, but most people don't have a real good definition of what they really are and how they work. In addition, in the over 50 years I've been in medicine, people have talked sort of in passing about the mind-body connection, but I found it was difficult to get anybody to explain to me what that meant. How does that really work? Well, they say, well, you know, if you have emotions, it makes you get sick. Okay, how's that work? And I found it difficult to find any solution or answer to that question. So the reality is that none of us can get through life without having emotional events. We have losses, loved ones die or disappoint us, our dreams go unfulfilled, we go bankrupt, we have car wrecks, we suffer injuries, all sorts of things happen. And then, of course, we now have this big epidemic in our country of soldiers returning from war and committing suicide. So this business about post-traumatic stress syndrome is, of course, become a major issue for us, and nobody really knows very well how to handle it. And here's a list of all of the various things that can happen with that. But we find that more and more people that aren't soldiers are having post-traumatic stress syndromes as well. So we need to get a handle on how to deal with that. Now, when this Time magazine cover came out, we were only losing one soldier a day. Now it's up to 20 a day. So 20 of our veterans a day are committing suicide. So we obviously need to figure out a way to deal with that. Now, the reality is that deployment and suicide are not necessarily related in the studies that have been done. But the important point, I think, of the military suicides is that pharmaceuticals are not very effective. Most people know that, and the studies have been done to show that there's really not a pharmaceutical that does very much in helping deal with suicides and the emotions that go with it. And I'm just passing through the studies that have been published about that. Now, in my observation, if you have treatment failures, it usually means you're using the wrong paradigm. And so I'm going to suggest to you a different paradigm as we go through the day. But I'd first like to tell you how I ended up sitting in this chair. I'm trained as an ophthalmologist and an ophthalmic plastic surgeon, and I did the majority of the research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery by the company called WITCHCRAFT. And I had a lot of fun doing that research, but unfortunately we didn't know at the time that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. and I'd in movements, so I'd be sitting there. It work really well if you're operating inside somebody's eyeball. And so for all of those reasons, I had to quit working at the end of November 1995. So I spent about 16 hours a day in bed sleeping, and I had 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could think clearly enough to understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch would go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. So during that 2 or 3 hours a day I could think, I had to figure out how to get myself well, because the best doctors to me with those various books was that each one talked about the fact that cells survive. And so I didn't really know too much about our design to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.4.
Quite a bit of feedback coming in and trying to talk to you guys is just because I meant to do this earlier, but I couldn't find a mic that worked, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of info about the man who's speaking right now, but I wasn't able to, So anyways, I was trying to, I'll try to fix this fucking echo there whenever I come back. But for now, we're just going to have to deal with it, I guess. So this is Jerry Tennant. He is a doctor. He is an amazing doctor who, as you heard, been through some shit. Initially, I was going to come on in between the first clip and now the second clip. But like I said, I went to come on and my mic wasn't working for whatever reason, and now I got this fucking echo. So it's kind of shitty. But anyways, that's besides the point. It is what it is. So the only reason people doing healing. Truth be told, I don't know if I'm ready for doing healing maggots and shit like that. Like I learned some lessons already. I don't. It's not something I continuously do. However, what Jerry Tennant here is teaching, is telling, and trying to get the information out is something you continuously can do. It's affecting your cells at the cellular level. How do you take in food and do exercise that will improve your cell growth? And if you do have a disease, if you have an issue, an illness, a disorder, well, then you can basically seek his help or look this information up, because there's a lot of it out there, which is what I did, and you can figure out how to magic before they're ready, or regrow. So when disease happens, it's basically you either, I think, the information from continuously regrowing. He actually give the exact how long your eyes have been here, your skin's been here, and all this and that. So the things inside your body that produce your cells are the exact same thing. So the things on the outside and the inside operate the same fucking way. So to make all that system strong, you have to take in the right food, and you have to have your pH level high. And this is where, electrolytes come from. Truth be told, I don't drink anything unless I put a little bit of Himalayan sea salt in it. And salt and water is electricity, it's electrolytes, it's those electrons that the body's going to need to send out. So the more you take in of that, the better you're going to be off. Even if you don't go see Jerry Tennant or use his little fork thing, tuning fork, or any of those things. If you don't do any of that crap, if you just take in high levels, pH, high alkaline water, shit like that, you're going to benefit. The benefits are going to be huge. He has many videos on YouTube that you can get this information from. He goes into different amino organs, or sodium and that, and not all salt is bad. The natural salts are good for you and needed. In my opinion, you fucking need them. And anyways, this is what helped me get my daughter to where she is today. I told the story of my 2-year-old daughter. She was born in October, and that first winter, because we're in Canada, so that winter wasn't even as cold as this winter, but it was cold. We got to like the minus 32s and the minus 33s, and that was the highest. And anytime, if she had a bath, she loves baths. She's that little scorpion, that water sign. She loves playing with the water. You ever want to calm her down, you give her water, she'll just over and over pour it in and out of cups. But truth be told, since I found this, I haven't made her a bottle. Whether it was her formula when she was really young, it was milk, it's juice, whatever. I put salt in it. Every single fucking thing. I do that. I put that in there. I got her hooked on soup. And, everybody talks about soup when you're sick, right? And why is that? Well, because, people run out to go get the kids Pedialyte, and they run out to go, and I've done it, salt and less salt and sodium-free shit like she has in winter, and she went from having 6 ear infections that first winter when she was developing, and to having none this year. None. She wasn't on antibiotics once. And it was at the point where we thought, because like in Cornwall here, just in my little circle of not really friends, acquaintances, there's 4 or 5, I want to say, because I'm not sure if the one had to do it or not, 4 or 5 parents with kids same age as my daughter that had to get their daughters this now, because she's 2, she's turning 3 this October, so this was her second. It's I don't know what specific kind, but I get one of those big tubs with 50 superfoods, and it's got everything from the algae to the amino acids to the chia seeds, everything in it. So I mash that all with everything, and that's one of the ways I stay super healthy. But so is the salt. I mean, you're literally drinking electricity when you're drinking salt and water, and it can be in juice, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be much. Gradual. The more you add, the better, but you don't have to make your drinks disgusting. Algae, technically electricity, form of electricity, but it's electricity, okay? Whenever you drink something base, your body will add something acidic to it. Now, you have stomach acids already to chew that shit up, so that's okay. Now, if you have something too acidic, it needs to be alkaline, or else you can have problems. Now, spicy foods, different things like that are fine. Your body knows how to protect against that. But there are specific things with, like Pepsi and Coke that deliberately fuck up that system, where the system doesn't know what to do. And if that's all you're intaking, I'm not telling anybody to stop drinking pop. I'm just saying, from the research I did, that shit is kind of very cleverly telling that system in your body, either shoot a base or shoot an acid at it to make that explosion and make the electricity. Because if you're not taking an alkaline, okay, then your body has to supplement for that. So how it supplements for that is what I'm just saying. It makes that reaction in your body. I was drawing a blank there on the point I was trying to get at. But anyways, that's how it supplements and creates electricity. That is a liquid electricity. That is that solution he was talking about at the beginning. How you measure electricity in water and in liquid, basically. So your body does this naturally. But taking in things like that, taking in too much alcohol, obviously, is not going to be good, because your body can only process so much at a time, and that's the reason. It's trying to hold off, like, what are you doing? You're fucking killing me, man, And I'm not dissing anybody, because I've done the same thing. And I still do. It's a liquid, and how root canals are considered that. So don't think that because you had a root canal, you're going to have cancer. That is not true. First of all, worrying about something is way worse than having or doing something. Meaning, if you're worried about lung cancer because you're smoking, well, the worrying is actually worse than the actual smoking. So don't worry. If you're doing both, then yeah, you're fucked. But if you're going to smoke, don't worry. And if you're not going to smoke, well, then you can worry, because then it's still only 1 out of 2. But if you're doing 2 out of 2, well, then you're getting the third step, cancer. But anyways, I have specific books and different things in here that you can literally help clean, rinse out your TV, get rid of infection, get rid of dead tissue. A free book I picked up, and I was looking for it before this. I was supposed to put this on early in the morning, but I hadn't, because I was trying to find that book. I was trying to record it and put the audio clip on here, because I didn't want to put something out saying root canals equal cancer, basically. And that's kind of what happens. I hope to God you guys aren't hearing this echo, and if you are, I'm very sorry. But oh shit, I lost my train of thought again. Anyways, okay, so that's better. Oh God, the echo's finally gone. So what I was saying, oh yeah, so there's a solution for your mouth, basically, and this works to clean your teeth, keep your breath fresh, and it's the right way to do it without killing your enamel and without risking having root canals and cavities and shit like that. This is the way you're supposed to brush your teeth, and not with the stuff we use today. So I'm going to put that on here if I can find it before the episode's done. If I can't, I'm very sorry, but I'll put it on one of the following ones, just so I don't leave people scared and thinking I put something out there saying, hey, root canal and scars equal cancer, and that's not true. The statistics are there, but these are people that don't take care of their body. And the point he's getting at is a root canal is basically, he says dentists are the only doctors that can get away with leaving dead tissue in the human body. Because no other doctor would do that, because dead tissue equals infection. Infection equals, risk. So yeah, if you're cleansing your mouth and you're taking care then yeah, you're not going to have to worry about that. However, if you had root canals, well, he gives you some options and what you can do, reverse it. And if it's not on the clip I have on here, I'll try to find it. And if not, do your own research and find it. You should always research the shit I put on here anyways, not just take it word for word. Once again, your worrying or your belief can be worse than the actual thing you're doing. All right? Someone thinking they're going to go to hell, it can fucking really fuck them up, even though hell doesn't exist. But anyways, so this isn't magic per se, but it all ties in, the element of air. Scorpio is the element of water, and it's argued that they're the strongest healers and stuff like that. Yet Hermes is the one who holds the caduceus. Archangel Raphael holds caduceus. And what is the caduceus? Well, it's those two snakes wrapped around. Snake is one of the scorpions. Transformations. The Scorpio is the only one that transforms. It begins with a scorpion, and then it becomes a snake, which the snake is, don't know, gets into Cancer. Mercury, when I say Hermes, are two separate things. I get that, but that's all inclusive. Hermes, Thoth, and Archangel Raphael, they're all kind of connected, them guys. And it's air. It's the element of air with the element of water, both together. So if you put those together, we're talking about taking water and putting salt in it. Well, what's water? It's H2O. It's water and air. What's healing? What's our bodies made out of? So there's a whole lot of stuff here. So if you're thinking I'm putting on some non-magic stuff, think again. And the reason it's on magic on a budget is for the simple fact that I live in Canada, so my healthcare is free. However, for someone in the States, if they can fix a lot of health problems just by doing this, if their daughter is in a similar situation as mine was, and you can stop going to the doctor 6 times and having to pay for antibiotics, and then all the Tylenol that comes with that because of the fevers and all the missed sleep and the missed work, that's a lot of money you're missing, right? If you simply get your daughter or son on an alkaline drinking diet, you don't have to change anything else, okay? Because I may be vegan and I may not believe in eating meat, but I don't believe in kids not eating meat either, unless you have definitely 100% got them on a very high protein, very high amino acid diet. Now, I do a lot of research saying that our bodies can't even intake the meat, and that the meat we eat does deteriorate our different parts of our bodies. There was a well-known movie that was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it. What the Health, I think it is actually, which talked about how diabetes is actually caused initially from meat, because the meat tears apart your pancreas, and then when you go to eat sugar, your pancreas can't neutralize all that sugar anymore. And it's not actually, the sugar seems like it's the fucking one, but it's really a red herring, which a red herring in a book is the person everybody thinks is the bad guy or the criminal, and it turns out it's someone else. And the red herring is actually the meat, basically. But I ate meat all my life, and I'm in pretty good health. As a child, I played sports. I was very active, very good body. Maybe that's genes, maybe that's magic, maybe that's I don't know what. So I'm not against. I don't think parents should take their kids off of a meat diet unless the kid wants to, for one, if they're very adamant about not eating it. And if that's because they're looking at too much shit on the internet and they're getting scared, well, you might need to take a look into that too there, just in case they're getting the wrong information. But unless you found an alternative with high protein and high vitamins and high stuff like that, because, there is stuff in meat that you can't get anywhere else. Yes, you might be eating dead animals and stuff like that, but if there is blood, there's iron and shit like that in that animal, and, our ancestors did eat animals, so that's a whole topic that I'll probably never get into, because, like I said, I don't believe in eating animals, but I'm never going to tell anybody that they should go this route. However, if you are, I would say try to do it the way it used to be. Back in the day, the meat on your plate was the smallest portion. Your vegetables are the biggest, and, your side dish, your pasta, or your carbs, basically, were, a medium. Whereas nowadays, there's more emphasis on sometimes the side and sometimes on the meat. And then you have all these other things, and, the vegetables are the smallest one. You grab chicken wings, and you got, 3 carrots and 2 celery sticks, or Vegetables are just on there for decoration nowadays. Which vegetables you get water from, and the water has minerals. The water's alkaline in it, and you're getting all these vitamins, magnesium, different fucking things. I mean, there's more in a vegetable than there is in that fucking meat or in those carbs. However, carbs hit a different part, and everything hits a different part. And Jerry Tennant actually talks about things like vegetable oil as well as salt. How everybody no trans fats, no trans fats. Well, you do need some of those, because the parts that he talks about that are the conductors or the capacitors, the battery packs, the things that your muscles and the energy that you take in, the electricity you take in, that the things that store, hold, or are in charge of sending the energy, those things are built with whatever you put in your body. I mean, everything you put in your things aren't just made in your body from nothing. It's whatever you're taking in. And it's not always just through your mouth, it's not always just what you drink. It's what you smell, it's what you touch, it's what you absorb through your skin. It's everything. The water you absorb through your skin you get way more water in a bath than you do drinking. But anyways, so if you're not putting in the right stuff, then you can't make the right stuff. And simply all vegetables is not going to do that. You're going to have a lot of good vitamins, and your system's going to be able to work well. But when it comes time to regenerate some of these important parts, well, if you don't have some fucking carbs in there, and the good carbs, like some things, I don't know, vegetable oil, I want to say some olive oil is probably one of the best, and not like doused in it, that it's killing all the nutrients and boiling all the vitamins out of stuff, but a little bit on there, because it's the difference between building a car out of plastic or metal. Cars depreciate in value, but before a certain year, they used to go up in value, and that's because metal is worth something and plastic fucking isn't. So what do you want your parts made out of, plastic or metal? So this is just a little eye-opener, and to try to save people money by not having to go to the hospital, not having their kids go to the hospital. Sometimes, you're going to want to work on some health magic and shit like that, but then there's going to be money situations that are going to come up, and you're going to need to keep focusing your magic on your money. I've certainly been in that position where it's like, fuck, I want to do all these different magics, but I can only focus one at a time because I'm still in my initiation phase, and I'm not even technically supposed to be doing magic, so what the fuck do I do? So stuff like this is a great side line to look at, because when you're in the occult, it's very hard to keep that secrecy vow, at least for me anyways, because all I'm taking in is occult. I'm off, I'm playing with my baby all day, and I'm learning occult stuff. I'm not even working out enough to say that I'm probably doing what Jerry's telling us to do. So, taking up this stuff, looking into alkaline stuff and all like that, it's not necessarily occult or magic. However, it ties into it, because as above, so below is so big that if you can learn how the cells work, if you can maintain your cell growth, if you can keep your cells healthy, if you can keep your cells protected, then technically you can live forever, because your cells are what control it. Everybody puts emphasis on the chakras and the heart and the brain and the blood and the bones and all this stuff, and all those things are important, but all those things are made up from cells. Cells are the beginning point. I don't know if it was this interview or another interview, but he said something, and it went along the lines of physics always comes before biology. And what he meant was, when there's a process happening in your body, basically, before anything else, the electrons, basically what's happening in your body is when your cells need to do something, they need more electrons. And that's what he's talking about when the pHs are different numbers and shit like that. They want more electrons, or they don't have enough electrons, and that's a different pH number and shit like that. So the higher the pH number you put in your body, basically, the higher the electrons you're putting in your body. Remember how I said electrons, the negative electricity is actually the healing electricity? Well, here's more fucking proof of that. Just like, your organs continuously dying off and reborn and regenerating continuously over and over again is more proof of reincarnation. But anyways, so biology is second. So if you're trying to use chemistry to influence your biology, well, you're not going to do it, because you need to use physics to fucking get your cells to listen first, because the cells are what everything's made up of. So as above, so below. We're taking care of the below right now. We're learning how to fix and regenerate and heal ourselves. And if you don't think this is magic, you should still listen to it anyways, because when it comes to doing healing magic and you have a broken fucking foot and you want to fix it up, well, you're going to want to tell your cells to do what? Well, you're going to want to tell them to have a certain charge. You're going to tell them that the cells, I want you to have so much extra electrons going there, whatever. This is how you can be precise in your spell to affect healing. All right. So anyways, I hope you enjoy. I'll be back on after. And yeah, here you go. Jerry Tennant, everybody.
Opportunity to be either an electron donor or an electron stealer. So in order to figure out which it is, use a sophisticated voltmeter, so to speak, called a pH meter. And when you measure a liquid with a pH meter, it will give you either the pH
Thoth too. I know they're two separate guys, but the same guy all the same time. They did.
0, whereas donor is the same thing as a pH of 14. And if it's neutral, if it's neither electron donor or electron stealer, then that's a pH of 7. So when we say that cells must run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45, we're saying cells must run between minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. Well, that was a wowzer for me. Guess what? Cells need energy to work. That makes sense. Minus 400 millivolts of electron donor. We are constantly wearing ourselves out and needing to make new cells. So what I'm seeing here is one slide behind that one, apparently. Does it work? Let me say that one more time. Chronic disease only occurs when you lose the ability to make new cells at work. Well, if that's the case, then we need to ask the question, what does it take to make a new cell that works? Well, I want to know it's not going to work because I have to have everything all at one time to build a new cell. So we have to have minus 50 millivolts of energy. We have to have everything it takes to make a cell. And then we have to deal with any of the toxins that are hanging around that damage cells as fast as we make them. The most common toxins we have to deal with are heavy metals like mercury, toxins coming out of our teeth, and GMO foods with the pesticide called Roundup or glyphosate. Now, the body actually has 4 different battery packs because the human body is a portable electronic device. Like all electronic devices, it has to have a battery pack or multiple battery packs. And so the reality is that